Like 70 pounds, did you? I finally know like 3 people that want something. Usually I don't know who the heck they want. I don't know. Yeah,
I know what
it's
you're
nice. No.
I told him we can go. What do you think this is adapted? Yeah. Store it all packaged up and then it was nice. Yeah. Because they say they understand. I dearly love them. They understand. It was like.
John's got a place in the lake. So
All right, we're gonna get started in a minute.
we'll stop in there by stuff.
There's fish in there.
Oh, yeah.
Remember defrosted when the power cord got there?
Yeah, oh, very good. Yeah.
So is that all right if I just say? All I say.
Yeah. John was talking. John was talking.
Is that all right?
He was there.
Yeah.
No, I didn't see that.
I don't know what I was doing.
It looks very. It's been all. Right.
I was off today. Yeah, I was out right after 5 o'clock. Fall back to sleep. Dog up.
And they're like, whatever.
Wait.
Good evening, everyone. Hi. Thank you for coming. You can all hear me. As a cheerleader.
Yes, we can hear.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Thank you. So everyone on Zoom, if you can mute your little boxes, that would be great. And thank you for joining us. This is Great Lakes Inspired. And special thanks to the Refuge, to Nicole and Todd and everyone here for hosting us. My name is Stephanie Proctor, and I'm one of a group of people, including John Hardig and Dick Micka, and others who started this group back in spring of 2021. This is our 5th event, but our first in-person event. So that's exciting. The idea behind this work is to bridge the arts with the science, and our hope is to inspire stewardship for our precious lakes and the heart of our lakes, which is the Detroit River. With that said, it's my honor to introduce Dorothy Mcleer. So Dorothy is the program coordinator at the University of Michigan Dearborn Environmental Interpretive Center. That's a lot. Holding multiple degrees in environmental studies, Dorothy also teaches the environmental interpretation and environmental education courses at the university. She has been involved with the Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge from the beginning and volunteers leading programs wherever possible, and sometimes in the guise of humbug Marsha. So that's what they call you.
When I'm in character.
And now I'm going to hand it over to Todd who is going to share about Alex, who will also be presenting today. And then after the presentation, we'll have a Q&A.
Thank you so much. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, the other presenter today is a gentleman named Alex Gilford. He uses art as an interpretive tool for learning more about subjects such as regional history and the environment. In addition to being an artist, Alex has worked as a museum educator at historical and art museums and as, just moving a lot of chairs, and as a park ranger with the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. By packing up his easel and painting in parks, preserves, and wildlife refuges, it is a goal of his to strengthen the relationship between the arts and the natural world and cultural heritages that these places preserve. Alex recently served as the artist in residence with the Friends of Detroit River, which he will be telling us more about this evening.
Yeah, I'm gonna see you. Believe? We're in person. In this build. Boy, what a journey, huh? Cool. All right, I am in a room full of friends. And I have a bunch of friends on the screen too. Thank you all for coming in one way or another, because we need to get out more. So my title is A River of Riches, because we will explore how rich this area is and what kind of riches we have to be thankful for. Okay. Oh, already. Where the music go? All right, there you go. No, it's still no. New battery. Sorry that you weren't recorded. Pearls of wisdom.
Take some picture.
So what we really want to see is at the back of the.
Yeah, so while we're getting this set up, if you haven't had a chance yet, I brought 6 paintings. So just so you can see them in person, and a little bit of the stories behind each one that are posted up on the marker board behind them. And each one of them were all painted on site, outdoors, depicting wildlife refuges owned by the Detroit River National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah, thank you. All right, nice to meet you, everybody. My name is Alex Gilford, and so I'll be the artist presenter tonight. So thank you very much for coming out for this presentation. Happy to share my work with you. And this is a painting that I did of the bald eagle nest at Point Mcleer. See if I can get the clicker to work.
Oh, I really like that painting too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
I know. Is it working now?
Yep.
Oh, no.
and so is the recording.
Yeah, so
Maybe so now it's not. I wonder if there's something to do with the recording.
it probably matters.
Oh, okay, it's working. I'm just gonna go with it.
All
right. So this is a little bit about what I'll be talking about today. Just painting at the Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge unit and how it's been such an inspiration for me artistically. And then I'm going to focus a lot on a recent partnership that I wrapped up as the artist in residence with the Friends of the Detroit River. And the 3 sort of components of that being stewardship, creation of art inspired by the river, public programming, and a little bit of what I imagine might be some good next steps. painting at the Detroit River National Wildlife Refuge. So this is at Lake Erie Metro Park, which is a cooperatively managed site between the Detroit River National Wildlife Refuge and the Huron-Clinton Metro Parks. And that's a view from the Cherry Hill Trail out with Celeron Island. And this was after I had been away from the region for a few seasons, doing other programs in Wyoming and Utah and Southern Ohio. And I came back early one morning on actually the 1st of this year, January 1st. I really wanted to start off the year right by painting. And I couldn't find a thing to paint. And as the day kept waning on, I was feeling that pressure, like if I don't get started now, I'm never gonna get anything done today. And it's actually one of those things that I really love about this landscape so much that I found is that it's not a landscape that immediately reveals itself to you as something just like textbook picturesque. Like you really need to spend time in it, investigating, learning, and it slowly sort of reveals itself to you. That's what I've found. And so being away from it, it was like I had lost touch and I had to spend time. And so I just packed up my stuff, walked the trails for a few hours, and then found this scene. It just came to me. I sort of like took the pressure off, and then I sat down and started painting. And then, so just to back up, so I started this thing called plein air. It's just a French term that means outdoors. So you take your painting equipment with you, you set up on site, and from direct observation, usually in one sitting, maybe a couple sittings, produce a work of art. And I had been painting in the studio for many, many years, and I just found that I was having trouble after working all day, going into the studio, being inside for even more time. I really just needed to get outside. And so this technique of plein air painting seemed like the first perfect solution. I could make art, I could get outside, I can enjoy these places that I love. And so I started doing this in 2019. And the first places that I went were the Detroit River National Wildlife Refuge units. So not particularly proud of these paintings, but they were like my first attempt to get out and do it. And so just some profiles of these great units that the refuge manages. So to the left is Mud Island. It's 21 acres, 75% forested, and a vital stopover habitat for migrating neotropical birds. And there's celery beds all around the island. If you go to like John Dingle Park E-course, you'll see tons of waterfowl, particularly on this spot in the river dabbling. And also you'll see tons of fishermen up and down that river walk right there because it's a great habitat for fish. And then in the middle is Grassy Island, and then Mamahuta Shoal over on the right-hand side. Together, those two units are about 304 acres, and they were initially acquired in 1961 to be established as the Wyandotte National Wildlife Refuge. That area supports 30 species of fish, numerous aquatic plants, diverse rock structures, and currents that are great as a nursery habitat for the fish. And then the island, which is the one in the middle, has some contaminated soil. The uplands are getting forested with early successional trees, a lot of invasive species management going on there. And then just a little bit of history with the Mamahuta Shoal. When I was reading about this place before I went to paint it, I was totally fascinated because there used to be an island there called Mamahuta Island. And it was 30 acres and it was lost to erosion in 1960. And in 1849, there was actually a lighthouse on the island, Mamahuta Lighthouse, and a lighthouse keeper and his family were the only residents on the island. It was rebuilt in 1866, and then the lighthouse washed away in 1950. So there's just so many great stories with these sites, cultural history, natural history, and I really love digging into the history of these places when I go into paint them, and that's sort of what inspires me in the creation process. This is a painting I did called Heron on a Muskrat Hut. And there's an image of me on the boardwalk at Lake Erie Metro Park doing the painting. And then on the right-hand side, I started partnering with the International Wildlife Refuge Alliance during their annual benefit dinners. donating some of my paintings for the silent auctions. This one was auctioned off during the live auction. This painting in particular, what it makes me think of, oh, look at those lines. I'm not doing that.
You're still painting.
Yeah.
Crazy. There's a ghost in the wires. When I look at this painting, it reminds me of one of the reasons I go out to do this type of painting, which is essentially to spend time quietly and directly observing nature. You know, when I go and do a painting, I'm out there for 10, 12 hours in complete quiet, just observing everything around me. And so I went out that day, particularly investigating all of the different muskrat huts over here and seeing if there's any activity. So a muskrat hut, a house or a push-up is made of vegetation and mud, and it's kind of like a beaver lodge or beaver den, but muskrats live in them. And I noticed that there was all these herons that were perching on top of them. And so I quickly got out my sketchbook and my willow charcoal, did some sketches, and then used those to reference it. Just some great wildlife watching that day. The bald eagles were active, some common golden eyes, buffleheads. And then I spent 2 days painting this one. The first day was actually Christmassy. And I did a technique called Grosse Ile, which is French for grayness or grade. So just using monochromatic paints. And then when I came back on the 27th, the day after, or a couple days after Christmas, I, keyed up some of those different colors, made the shadows darker, the highlights a little bit more keyed up. And then the next step, it's sometimes these paintings get legs, like I never know, I'll paint them and then I'll put them away and they'll never come out again. And then sometimes other people get inspired by them. So this one, it was great. It could be a contributing factor to IRA through the benefit dinner. And then pretty soon here, it's going to be on the cover of Great Lakes Foundation brochure. And the Great Lakes Foundation is a charity that's dedicated to preserving the richness of wilderness cruising areas of the Great Lakes and fostering the art and culture of cruising, sailing. They raise huge amounts of funds for preservation of maritime wilderness projects. So just happy to contribute any way that I can to stuff like that. This one, Fallen Oak, Humbug Marsh. So actually just before this, I did a quick loop around the green trail. I painted this in 2020, and that tree is still in the exact same position. Blows my mind. As Dorothy was mentioning, Humbug Marsh, the last undeveloped shoreline along the U.S. mainland of the Detroit River, designated as Michigan's first wetland of international importance by the Ramsar Convention in 2010. And through visiting the refuge units and volunteering on the stewardship crew, it was actually the first time that I had even ever learned about what old growth trees were. And, I was really interested in regional history at the time and, particularly in the 1700s. And so it was just kind of mind blowing to think, okay, this history that I'm reading about, this tree witnessed that, and I'm standing here looking at it and it's still alive. Like, it's really crazy to wrap your brain around that. And so, places like the Humbug Marsh have been really beneficial for me as an artist, but also just as a steward for taking care of the subjects that inspired me to make art. It's increased my appreciation for them, encouraged me to be more inquisitive, inspired me to join in the efforts to preserve and share them with others. And now that this site is preserved, it's here for many more generations to hopefully find their own connections and ways to be inspired by it. This is at the fixed unit. So the fixed unit is the majority of the 95.03 acre fixed unit. It used to be agricultural fields. In 2016 to 2017, it was restored back into wetlands as coastal wetlands, a small forest. There are two diked wetlands that are managed by the biologists. And it has a healthy population of prairie corn catgrass, which is a Michigan species of special concern. And you probably cannot help but notice the nuclear cooling towers in the background, which is the neighbor, one of the neighbors to the fixed unit. That's the DTE Energy Electric Company's Enrico Fermi Nuclear Generating Station. And then just like I mentioned back there, whenever I do a painting, I always try to do a little bit of writing alongside it. So this was my description of that day. As I walked into the field, a heavy wet snow began to fall. The snow mixed with the hissing steam that billowed out of the nuclear power plant's cooling towers into the gray overcast sky. The features of the scene beyond my vicinity became dull and muted. In this floating scene that seemed to exist somewhere out of time, a white-tailed deer silently leapt across the dike into the tall grass, checked me, and disappeared into the mist. There. I like this laser. I never. Nice. Okay. Mutant trumpeter swans, humbug marsh. So this one I kind of cheated. If you're familiar with the landscape, used some artistic liberties. So that's Humbug Island, and this is a view from the Green Trail. And then I pivoted the towers of the DTE Trenton Power Plant and put them behind it, even though of course the island's over there and the power plant's over there. But compositionally, I just liked it that way. And so I just wanted to kind of illustrate pressures on native species such as trumpeter swans. Trumpeter swans are these three right here with the black bills. Because of invasive species like these mute swans with the orange bills and habitat loss. Yeah. So just some history about this power plant. So it's a coal burning power plant. It was built in 1924 by Detroit Edison, and it was actually decommissioned last year. DTE, part of their claim is that they're transitioning to more of a natural gas and renewable energy plant focus. Yeah. And then this is one of the paintings on the far left. So if you want to check it out in person, that would be great. And then again, some of the description that I wrote alongside it. This is a scene, so that little spit of land right there, the Handler Drain, the day that I painted it. So I've been asking around so many people, if anyone knows whose boat this is and why it's there. I'm just like fascinated, and no one has had a solid answer for me. So let me know if you know. So I enjoy spending time on my own, plying the US and Canadian shores of the river, searching for subjects to paint. As I do so, I continue to learn about the Detroit River region's colorful history, which still floats just under the surface. A diverse range of cultures and communities, as well as the natural habitats tucked into pockets and thriving into quiet determination. I continue to find the area to be altogether dramatic, tragic, scenic, rustic, mysterious, gritty, humble, and unique. And this is down at the Strong unit. And this picture right here it was part of a live auction for the one of IRA's benefit dinners. And one thing I remember about this day is it was so hot. and there's like zero shade, and I was profusely sweating and like sunburned. And Susan White, the refuge manager at the time, pulled up and was like so fascinated by what I was doing and was taking pictures of me. And I know I just like looked like a hot mess. I don't know what happened to those pictures, but so just some main features there. That's osprey. There's a structure on the Strong unit with an osprey nest that the birds are utilizing. And then it's perched on that snag right there. So a snag is a standing dead tree. It provides habitat for a wide variety of wildlife, including decomposers like bacteria, fungi, insects, other invertebrates, as well as consumers like birds, bats, and small mammals. If you have a standing dead tree on your property and you can let it stand for a little while longer and it's safe, it's a great resource for natural life. So the Strong unit, it's 210 acres in total, emergent wetlands, wet meadow communities. There's also a former shoreline ridge of trees, and it's highly influenced by the fluctuating water levels of Lake Erie. This is Freighter by Grasse Island. So that's Grasse Island right there, which we saw earlier, one of the refuge units. And this was a painting that I did for a live painting demonstration at one of Ira's benefit dinners. I learned a valuable lesson that night because I painted it during the event. And then later that evening, we auctioned it off live. And oil painting takes like a year to dry. So actually Joanne Van Aken got it. And she sent me a photo days later with a big thumb swipe across it. So I went and picked it up and like repainted that area. Waited till it dried to the touch in a couple weeks and then brought it back to her. That was, the request was to put a freighter in there. So I put a freighter in there. I think that I really got caught up in the sky though. I think that's where I focused most of the time. There was also like an impromptu like joking wedding ceremony like on the pavilion while I was painting. And it was just like, there was so much going on. Okay, so now I'm gonna focus on the Friends of the Detroit River, artists and residents. And the three components of that being stewardship, art creation, public programming. And I hope you're reading all of those tiny words over there super quick. That was just a handout that Friends of the Detroit River put together when they were tabling at this event called Art Is Done as like a one-pager to describe what in the heck this partnership was. But really, it's just the main points of it are stewardship, art creation, public programming. So why is this artist in residency important? So in my words, what I hope to get out of it as an artist, what I hoped that Friends of the Detroit River as a conservation organization in the river region was getting out of it, and what the public was getting out of it, I would describe as this. That the artist in residency is an example of how making art can be an act of stewardship and serve conservation efforts in the Detroit River region. When investigating which subjects to paint, I researched the ecological and cultural legacy of the region. While spending time painting on location, I explored the locale. The result is a visual record of the places I interpreted it. It's my hope that the paintings and the stories that they tell will stimulate curiosity and inspire others to become active stewards for the Detroit River region's environment, as well as the people and animal inhabitants that rely on it. So some of the stewardships that I participated in, the easiest way for us to kind of swing it was that I would participate in events that they already had on their calendar. So the ones that I participated in was the spring cleanup at Mcleer Elias Park. And that is that photo right there. That's my wife Caitlin and I picking up some trash. And so that was a photo taken by Todd McIntyre, photographer for the Detroit News. And this was a cool sort of connection, you know, I really wanted to show that the stewardship and then the art making were influencing each other. And so going to this site and doing this cleanup day tied in with a painting that I went to that same, almost that same exact spot and did a painting of. And one thing that was really probably the most surprising to me in that experience was going along that shoreline and all of the tiny little bits of plastic, like millions and millions of tiny little bits of consumer plastic. And it was like maddening, like you can pick up a bottle or a bag, but like, how do you get all of these tiny pieces of plastic? And then in the background there, that's another set of cooling towers. That's the Grosse Ile Trenton plant, which is that's one of the only structures left on the site, which is a 200 million Superfund cleanup site. And then down here, we did the Detroit River paddle. That was my first time kayaking the Humbug Marsh. Got to utilize the kayak launch over there, and Mackenzie Wallachek, who is the stewardship director at Friends of the Detroit River and was sort of my liaison for the residency. She led this group, our group, and we went back into the Handler Drain, and she did some interpretive stuff and was talking to the group about Phragmites, and it's really pleasant event. And then this other one up here, this was the Belle Isle cleanup, Belle Isle State Park. We kayaked along the canal that goes from Lake Okanoka to Lake Tacoma and just picked up trash out of the water. Okay, so now I can talk a little bit about the paintings that I created for the residency. So this was the first one that I did, and I did it for a live painting demonstration at the Shiver on the River event at the Dawson Great Lakes Museum. And so for this one, again, I learned a little bit about that live painting demonstration at the IRA benefit dinner. So what I did for this one is I came on my own and then did a one full layer. So I knew that I was in good shape once the day of the event came. And one thing that I love about the Detroit River is the color of it. Sometimes when you get when it's not too windy, you can really see into the water because of all the suspended organic solids. It has this like teal color that is so unique. And so that first day there was no ice on the water, and so I did this sort of blanket of teal. And then I came back for the day of the event, and it was totally covered in ice floes. And I just put a little note here, or an excerpt from my artist statement. The ice flows, it's one of my favorite sounds. So the river was covered by an ice flow. The tinkling, crinkling sounds that the shifting ice sheets make as they are pushed down the river is one of my favorite sounds. I tried to visually capture that auditory sensation by layering the snowy ice sheets on top of the frigid teal water below. This was the second painting that I did. This is called Point Lea Green, Lake Erie Metro Park. So duck hunting has long played an important part in the conservation culture of the Detroit River's downriver area in western Lake Erie. The region's oldest duck hunting club formed in 1875, and it was based in Point Lea Marsh. Owners constructed club boathouses and painted them with a color that became known as Point Lea Green. So I learned about this color from visiting the exhibits in the Marshlands Museum in Lake Erie Metro Park, which is a museum the local cultural and natural heritage of the downriver and Lake Erie region. It's one of my favorite small local history museums. So if you've never been there, definitely go. If it's been a while, go back and visit it again. And it's just one of those things that it's like the more you know about a subject, the more I get inspired by it, the more I appreciate it. So I've walked by this green boathouse so many times when going on the Trappers Run Trail, never thought anything about it. And as an artist, of course, seeing a picture that encapsulates natural history, cultural history, focus in this region, it was like so incredible. And then this boathouse just carries so much more significance to me. So I decided it was worth painting a little muskrat hunt. So we had some discussion about the rail bridge on Dorothy's first slide. So this is all about that history, actually. So on Grosse Ile, what is now called Sunrise Park, there is this stone abutment that doesn't look like much, but actually has this incredible story behind how it got there. So in 1873 to 1910, there was a rail bridge that crossed from Sunrise Park to Stony Island. Stony Island is right here in the distance. And it connected with a ferry that ran from Stony Island to Canada. And the Grosse Ile Parkway Bridge, which is, we call the Free Bridge now, that was the rail line that connected Grosse Ile to the mainland. And that stone abutment right there is where that rail bridge connected with Grosse Ile before extending out to Stony Island. And it's all that remains of it, kind of. In 1908 to 1912, there was a temporary town on Stony Island where workers who constructed the Livingston Channel lived with their families. So the Livingston Channel, kind of on the other side of Stony Island, it's a dredged out area, which is what allows for the large hulls of the freighters to pass up the Detroit River. And so they're the people who sort of did the hard lifting of that construction and a temporary settlement on Stony Island. And actually, Paul Gluer of the Grosse Ile Nature and Land Conservancy took me on a little through when I was out here painting. We met up, and he's like loves to introduce anyone to his passionate sport of kayaking. So he took me on a show and tell tour through Stony Island and Livingston Channel and Crystal Island. And there's all of these remnants of the previous human habitation on the island, like sunken and rotting barges and things like that. And it's actually fascinating. And this also made the news too. Beavers utilized one of those half-sunken barges and created this giant den on it. There's also a heron rookery that has around 140 active nests, which was just like cacophony when we were kayaking through it, like there's hundreds of herons in the air. So today Stony Island's a 52-acre island, not inhabited by humans, although, as I mentioned, the remains are still there. Michigan DNR owns the island. It's recognized as a hotspot for biodiversity, and the Friends of the Detroit River have been involved in a large habitat reconstruction project on the island. And one of the most visible elements is these shoals right here, protective shoals that prevent things like erosion. So, you know, like the story of the Mount Mahout Island that got swept away. So that doesn't happen. It also creates these sort of underwater refuges for spawning habitat for fish. All right, so that spring cleanup that I was talking about over at Mcleer Elias Park. So this was the painting that I did kind of from that same spot where the photo was of Caitlin and I doing that cleanup there. So right here, and actually I'm going to reference John Hardig too, because, you know, so this is the backwater along the Trenton Channel of the Detroit River. It was once known as the Black Lagoon. During the 1940s and the 1970s, millions of gallons of oil were being discharged to the river each year. To put this into perspective, it only takes 1 gallon of oil to pollute 1 million gallons of water. Because of the river's flow slowed into this depositional area, much of the contaminants settled there, darkening the water. From 2004 to 2005, 115,000 cubic yards of sediment were removed and contained. And then, you know, some other stuff going on here. I was facing directly into the sun, and it was like completely reflected off the water, and it was like these little shards of like white light flash. And so I tried to kind of capture that phenomenon, you know, where this is like this blinding light, and then the background is all silhouetted. So there you have the stacks of the Trenton Channel Power Plant, and also the Grosse Ile Toll Bridge. So since we talked a little bit about the history of the Grosse Ile Parkway Bridge, we should probably talk about some history of this bridge too. It's a swing bridge, which is really neat because so there's like a pin right there in that pylon, and it pivots horizontally so that boats can pass through. It was actually built between 1912 and 1913. It was the first automobile bridge to the island, and the construction was sort of pushed and funded by Edward Voigt, who owned most of the northern end of the island at that time. And he operated what was known as the Island Home Stock Farm. And he really just wanted a faster way to get his horses across from the island to the mainland. So he got a bridge there. This painting is called Hydrologic Connection, Belle Isle State Park. I'm very thankful for some of those pavilions, because otherwise I probably couldn't have painted this thing. When big, fluffy, wet snowflakes mix with oil paint on your palette, you're done. It's like sand. So I really wanted to capture that simple, calm, snowy day where all the colors are subtle and the details are muted by the atmosphere. And also, you know, part of this partnership with the Friends of the Detroit River is that I would be creating paintings kind of generally inspired by the river, but also depicting some of the projects they had been involved in, like those protective shoals around Stony Island. So this was one that this is a hydrologic connection that the Friends of the Detroit River put in with many other partners. So in the 1950s, the waterways, so like the internal ponds and lakes and canals in Belle Isle were closed off at the connection points to where it flowed in and out of the Detroit River. And that made the water become stagnant, and fish were no longer able to migrate between these inland water bodies on the island and back into the river. And a lot of habitat degradation negatively impacted what's left of what we refer to as a wet mesic flatwood habitat. So on Belle Isle, there are, you know, aside from the structures and the recreational development, there's 200 acres left of this unique type of ecosystem called a wet mesic flatwood habitat. So wet to mesic, mesic means like middle, so wet to middle forest of soils that supports upland and lowland hardwoods on poorly drained glacial lake plains. It's a globally impaired forest type. And the remaining 200 acres on the island is the largest example of this type of natural community. So just a, absolutely amazing natural resource gem, another one right in the Detroit River on Belle Isle. Another thing that, in addition to these hydrologic connections, the project also added deep channels and pools, a fish spawning bed and nursery habitat, a mud flat for shorebirds, tree snags, basking logs, wet meadow, and reptile and amphibian passage. All right, so 6 points. We heard about 6 points in Dorothy's presentation. So 6 points was purchased in 2015 by the federally recognized Wyandot Nation of Oklahoma for the Wyandot of Anderton Nation here in Southeast Michigan. This 15-acre area of wetlands and uplands located in Gibraltar, Michigan is sacred to the Wyandot of Anderton Nation. Again, referenced in John Hardig. So 6 points was the village of the Wyandot chief. I'm not going to butcher that name. His settler name was Adam Brown. Actually, John, do you know how to pronounce it?
No.
Okay. So Adam Brown is the great grandfather of Chief Billy Friend of the Wyandot Nation of Oklahoma. Brownstown Township in Michigan was named after him. And then, I tried this area right here. This is called the Turtle Pond. And, I like to play little artistic games in my head, I guess, when I'm painting. But the crest of the Wyandot of Anderton Nation is the medicine wheel, which is white, black, yellow, and red. And it's on the back of a turtle. And so I saw this red-winged blackbird fly by these bright white tree trunks. And I was like, those are the colors, got to put it in there. Because that's a little nod to the place where I'm painting. Nice. And I reached out ahead of time to everyone in the Wyandot of Anderton Nation to get their blessing to visit and kind of kept them apprised of how the painting was going and stuff. So it was cool just to sort of make that connection through doing it. This was another interesting little community connection that I was able to create through painting. So it was actually just like a random email that I got. I don't know how it came to me from Shirley and Rich Fonte, who are residents of Grosse Island in Gibraltar. And they have this arched bridge here. And it's, seen better days, and they're really hoping to restore it. There are some other folks that want to tear it down completely and put a completely modern bridge in. And so they're fighting to preserve it and have the money to restore it, which they're claiming is actually not as expensive. So I thought, this would be a great subject to paint for the residency. And then just some history. Grosse Island got its name from the historic practice of Native Americans and settlers leaving their mares on the island to foal and graze. And the arch bridge is unique to the location, and they're trying to uncover, who built it, the exact date, and those sort of concrete facts that would allow them to get it on the National Historic Registry. But aside from that, it's, undisputably the many generations of people that have called that area home identify with it, and it's important to them. So I was happy to be a part of that. Dorothy Wood, councilwoman of Gibraltar, a museum steward who created the Gibraltar Historical Museum, bought this painting for their collection. So, people can continue to learn about it, and they can, print it and hopefully raise some funds for their initiative. So here we're returning back to the Detroit River National Wildlife Refuge. So this is on the refuge gateway where we are right now. This is the sidewalk going out to the pier. Detroit is renowned for its walleye fishery. During the walleye run, the river is flooded with fishing boats. I moved to Detroit in 2014, and I remember going out to Belle Isle and crossing the MacArthur Bridge in April and seeing that the river just like blanketed in boats and being like, what do they know that I don't know? And, so the Detroit River has its own endemic population of walleye, but every spring, walleye come up from Lake Erie and Lake St. Clair and come here to spawn. And it's a world-renowned fishery for those that are chasing walleye. And this area is part of an area called the Detroit River Conservation Crescent. So pictured in the painting is the Refuge Gateway, Humbug Island, Calf Island, and then out in the atmospheric distance there is Celeron Island. And then I was really kind of captivated by this passing storm. It sort of went between Calf Island and Celeron Island and those sort of like sinews of the rain coming down. And I was so inspired by those the walleye fishermen who come out there before the sun rises and like the rain and the cold, and I mean they are tough because I was sitting there trying to paint and I was like, I can stick it out. They've been here the whole time. I can do it too. But I came back like a month later to finish it. And this is the morning view from BASF Waterfront Park. So, you know, one of my favorite things is to go around the river and explore new places. I never knew about this little riverfront park until I went to the Detroit River Keeper dinner at the Wyandotte Boat Club. Saw this scene and knew I had to come back and paint it. So we have a view of, this is Fighting Island. This is Grasse Island. Got a plume of steam right here from the steel plants on Zug Island. There's one of the cranes for the construction of the Grosse Ile International Bridge. I really just wanted to kind of capture the like calm serenity in the morning. And I was almost thinking of like a musical staff here with these geese, like music, like notes on a musical staff sort of crescendoing as they went over to the other side of the island. But one of the other things is, of course, you have the distinct Detroit downtown skyline as seen from a distance with the Ren-Sen right there. And it was totally obscured because of the haze. It always settles in low-lying areas like the Detroit River region because of all the smoke from the wildfires raging up in Canada and Michigan. This is a painting called Downtown Riverside Park. So Riverside Park is one of these phenomenal new city of Detroit parks. That area has been sort of cordoned off for so long, you know, because of the environmental pollution. It's recently been turned into, you know, like a recreational city park, and it is so heavily utilized by the folks that live there. It's just a bustling place. Great to see so many people fishing and doing all kinds of activities. But I was particularly inspired to paint here because of sort of the simultaneous actions of two things occurring, which was the demolition of the Boblo boat Detroit terminal here. So, you know, that mural right there, the Boblo boat Detroit dock is sort of a landmark. And so to see that getting torn down while simultaneously the new Grosse Ile Bridge being constructed. Yeah, this is the Canadian side, so the deck extending out here, and then the deck extending out here, but not yet meeting in the middle. And then the sort of white sail of a sailboat passing through the center of the river. I just thought, you know, had a really good narrative quality to it. And I felt if I don't paint it now, they're gonna finish that bridge before I get back down here. Okay, so just a bit about the public programming that we did as part of the residency. So this first one, as I mentioned, was the live painting demonstration. Mostly just to blow people's minds that I paint outside in the winter time. So there's this was actually really neat. This guy here, there was a news segment, which I'll show you from WXYZ, and he was at home and saw it and got his heaviest winter coat and came down there because he's an artist and family members are artists, and he wanted to come down and chat with me. And so he stood out there and talked with me for a while. Most folks were either inside of the pilot house or the DeRoy Hall, checking out the activity from the warmth. They were the smart ones for sure. Let's see if this plays. So this was the WXYZ coverage of the live painting demonstration. Just break it up a little bit with some multimedia.
The annual Sugar on the River Eco Fair kicked off 2 months ago inside the Friends River is hosting this free family event. They're really something to do this weekend. And it helps the movie behind them and actually the border rise. With a look at some of the fun you can have there. Inside this dam is now grading the bitter well.
Jen, I'm not sure, you know, with a lot of television, what people can do, but keep your hands outside in the cold. What is the Detroit is from the, I mean, you can see ice counting moving across, and I was wondering, the people call shiver on the river, we'll find out. Apparently, Atlas is one of the artists who's gonna be really cold and painting outside in the cold. What do you do? Why are you punching me on something?
Plain painting of demonstration, plain air painting, which is a French term. Yeah. So many. It just reminds you.
Do they stand outside the cold to see you paint?
I don't know, they can stay inside the work in the back there, they can see through the windows here, they can watch each other on painting, and at the end of the day, painting.
You need to enjoy some painting out in the cold, though.
Yeah, it's hard to see it from observation.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Alright, so you're gonna be doing one painting, is that what it is?
One painting, so what's on the equal right now, my under painting that I recognize.
Yeah.
Today, I'll be done.
Okay, and here's one thing I wanted to ask, is how are you gonna be doing this? Man, I can't even take my hands out. And Jen's probably laughing in the studio right now. But how are you gonna be doing it? Does it off even work outside over here?
Not for long.
Is this oil painting?
This is oil painting.
Yeah, it's not, it's like, does it dry out instantly?
No, it'll stay, actually, it'll stay,
Okay, cool, man, I'm wishing you all the best. I would tend to stay and watch you paint, you know, I like it, but I mean, it's too cold.
It's the name of the eco-friendly taking place at Johnson Museum on Belle Isle. Jen, folks can come down here, it's on until 3 p.m. It's free to enter the museum. And once again, when we come back, we'll be talking a little bit more what people can expect indoors. And they can enjoy this as long as you look at the window there, you can stand outside and watch our space. And now back to you.
Yeah, for us, I'm gonna call you a Michigan winter warrior. We're gonna let you go inside and warm up. Back in with Roz in about 30 minutes.
So just between you and I, before we went live, Faraz leaned over to his cameraman and said, "What river is this?" After this, we waited a couple months until it was dry, and I lent it to the River Keeper benefit dinner for the silent auction. And so the Detroit River Keeper is the nonprofit citizen action group organized to protect, preserve, and restore the ecological integrity of the Detroit River watershed for current users and future generations through advocacy and citizen action. And so everything, 100% of the profits went towards this program. And the lucky bidder was Nicole LaFleur. Running the show tonight. All right, and then the last program to sort of wrap up the residency was my solo exhibition called Wayfair Plein Air Paintings. So I included within the inventory of 36 paintings all the ones that I had done as part of the residency. It also included paintings that I had done as part of the Appalachian Forest Stewardship Residency, the Friends of the Porkies Artisan Residency, Porcupine Mountain Wilderness State Park, some paintings that I'd done while working as a park ranger with the Forest Service out west, and then just some other ones that I'd done independently around here. And for each sale, I donated 10% back to the Friends of the Detroit River. So, and just thinking about how artists partner with conservation organizations, I feel like it's really great to have sort of a concrete anchor, like giving back financially in any way that I can. So I've started doing this, trying to, any sale I make, donate a little bit back to these places that preserve the locations that inspired the fake art in the first place. And then also the Friends of the Detroit River was able to set up an info table to spread good word about their organization and the great work they do. They were there for the opening reception as well as the art festival on the closing weekend. And there's all the lovely people at the opening reception. One really awesome thing that I noticed that night was there were conservation professionals, obviously the Mackenzie and Kaylee here with Friends of the Detroit River, but also Michigan State University Extension, some DNR folks, some Huron-Clinton Metro Park folks, and then as well as, you know, professionals that I work with in the arts field, and of course, just friends, families, and supporters. But that's sort of my goal in all of this, was to bridge this sort of the conservation professionals and arts professionals. And so to see them come out to this event was, I felt like we had done a good thing. Okay, so it's a good start. What's next? So on an individual level, I'm gonna be honest, I put anonymous, but I think you said this in our naturalist course. Dorothy's my teacher, by the way. So nature is where you are. And this has really resonated with me because it's like, you know, instead of looking everywhere else, look where you are and start taking care of it. And so for me, the visual arts, that's my trade, my practice, something I've been developing for a long time. And that's the method for learning and the lens through which I process the world around me. Every interest that I have and develop, art follows behind it. And it's just one of those interpretation tools that I use. So it just made sense for me to start there. And the health of the environment affects the well-being of everyone in every community. So, you know, my little bit of advice is start with your own area of expertise in the community where you live and find a way to incorporate stewardship of our shared natural resources into the work and put a plan into action that genuinely benefits the environment in your region. On an organizational level, there are a number of environmental organizations doing such fantastic work in this region. I'd love to see each of them develop more programs in partnership with artists, however that might look for them, and, you know, use artists to help them reach their institutional mission. And really, I just hope that the model that the Friends of the Detroit River and I put together, it serves as some kind of inspiration for others who might have similar ideas brewing. And I'll just say, this is a technical business term. It's called a BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goal. What I sort of like, the Detroit River residency that I did was sort of a scaled down version of something I would love to see. And the name kind of bumping around in my head is the Detroit River Arts Exchange, which is where you really take advantage of the simultaneous local and international, you know, dint of geography that the Detroit River is, and get artists on the Canadian side, a group of artists on the US side, pair them with conservation professionals at each side of the river and do exchanges where they're doing stewardship work on each side, producing artwork inspired by each side, and then having public programming and exhibitions on each side. Love to see that happen. So if anyone has any, you know, any ideas of how that might come to fruition. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, that's it for me.
Alex, if you want to stand up, if anyone has questions, I know we're kind of running late on time, but you're welcome to ask questions. That was really inspiring.
Oh.
We bamboozled you, huh?
Hey, Alex, when are you gonna paint the lotus beds?
What am I gonna do?
When are you gonna paint the American lotus beds? There's a sea of them between here and
Yeah.
Ohio.
You
They're
know,
everywhere.
I did early on in 2019, I did a painting that was actually auctioned at one of the IRA benefit
You
dinners.
got that one.
Yeah, did, yeah, there you go. Yeah, I gotta go back and do it again. That was one of those, like, you know, phenomenal discoveries for me coming down here for the
Oh,
first
it's
time.
unbelievable.
I mean, I grew up on lakes and wetlands and I had never seen American lotuses before and my mind was just completely blown. Yeah.
Well, this is good news for me because I usually buy the things that you guys bring from your house at the auctions. So I'm looking forward to the time that I get to bid on house. From your house. John,
To add to your thought of this exchange, across the river, there's gonna be the second national urban park in Canada, Ojibwe National Urban Park. Well on its way to becoming established, and national parks are magnets for artists, right? And they have a sister relationship with Point Healy National Park, so you have an international wildlife refuge. Two, national parks run by Parks Canada and their friends groups and everything. It seems like that would be a logical mechanism to do that.
Absolutely. I reached out to the coordinator of the Point Peely residency. I think they've done it for 2 years. They were kind of broken up by COVID, but I think they came back to it. And yeah, I'm curious about kind of how they're running their program and seeing if there's any way of kind of bringing it over this way. Yeah.
One of the things that I love to see, and I don't know whether it would fit into your vision, but is not just incorporating visual artists, but different kinds of performance art as well, whether music, and I think about Matrix Theater, which used to have a big puppet program where they had these huge puppets and they would do presentations with puppets and live actors, and they had a amazing one at the the celebration of the Detroit's 300th anniversary about the Detroit River and also the hidden rivers that have been covered all throughout the Detroit area. It was just blew me away. Detroit Audubon had them perform that at the Wayne County Community College and one of our conferences that you were at, John, I think.
Yeah, that is a great idea. Some of those puppets still exist. The Sturgeon one and stuff, and it's down in their offices in Southwest Detroit, but
Well, that's good, because I heard a few
bringing them
goddamn
out,
other stories.
incorporating them, that is an amazing program, It's not active right now, but they could be resurrected,
Right.
Yeah, great idea. I mean, there's so many artistic mediums that you can use to be inspired by the refuges here, and I'd love to see all types of artists, get involved. Paint's just what I do. Yeah.
Interesting artwork.
thank you. I appreciate that. You're thick as an artist, just
Yeah, I know. I think you had some stuff in the office, actually.
So, Dorothy, what's the single most important thing that we can all do to help you inspire a sense of wonder?
Get out the door. As I said, it could be just that simple as going outside, and research has been done about the fascination factor. And how many of you have had stressful days? Yeah. If you give yourself a break, even if it's 10 minutes, going outside, doesn't even have to be as outside pretty like this. Just go outside, give yourself a break. Something is going to catch your eye, and the fascination factor will take over from the frustration factor. And research shows that when you come back to that tedious, frustrating activity that you had to walk away from, you are refreshed. You do it better. So truly, give yourselves a break and go out the door, because there's going to be something that catches your eye or your ear or perhaps your nose, and just let it take you somewhere. Doesn't cost you anything either.
I think that's a really good note, and we can just, everyone can talk amongst themselves, but thank you so much. Yeah, and look at the work that I have.
Gotta head it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Embarrassing.
Yeah.